Could you do that, guys?
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
That's good enough. We did it all 3 times. So next we have a reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 19, verse 25. And I'll read it once through. We've already practiced it. I'll read it once through, and then we'll do the word meanings together. Tatra bhavad bhagavan vyasaputro yadrichayagam atamanunapeksha alakshalingo nijalava Ritas Chavalar Avaduta Veshaha. Word meanings. Tatra, there. Abhavat, appeared. Bhagavan, powerful. Vyasaputra, son of Vyasadeva. Yadrichaya, as one desires. Gam, the earth. Atmanaha, while traveling. Anapekshaha, disinterested. Alakshya, unmanifested. Linga, symptoms. Nijalabha, self-realized. Tushtaha, satisfied. Ritaha, surrounded. Cha, and balai, by children. Avaduta, neglected by others. Veshaha, dressed. So, translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. At that moment, there appeared the powerful son of Vyasadeva, who traveled over the earth disinterested and satisfied with himself. He did not manifest any symptoms of belonging to any social order or status of life. He was surrounded with women and children, and he dressed as if others had neglected him. Please repeat. At that moment there appeared the powerful son of Vyasadeva, who traveled over the earth disinterested, and satisfied with himself. He did not manifest any symptoms of belonging to any social order or status of life. He was surrounded with women and children. And he dressed as if others had neglected him. Purport. The word Bhagavan is sometimes used in relation with some of the great devotees of the Lord, like Shukadeva Goswami. Such liberated souls are disinterested in the affairs of this material world because they are self-satisfied by the great achievements of devotional service. As explained before, Shukadeva Goswami never accepted any formal spiritual master, nor did he undergo any formal reformatory performances. His father Vyasadeva was his natural spiritual master because Shukadeva Goswami heard Srimad Bhagavatam from him. After this, he became completely self-satisfied. Thus, he was not dependent on any formal process. The formal processes are necessary for those who are expected to reach the stage of complete liberation. But Shukadeva Goswami was already in that status by the grace of his father. As a young boy, he was expected to be properly dressed, but he went about naked and was uninterested in social customs. He was neglected by the general populace, and inquisitive boys and women surrounded him as if he were a madman. He thus appears unseen while traveling on the earth of his own accord. It appears that upon the inquiry of Maharaj Parikshit, the great sages were not unanimous in their decision of what was to be done. For spiritual salvation, there were many prescriptions, according to the different modes of different persons. But the ultimate aim of life is to attain the highest perfectional stage of devotional service to the Lord. As doctors differ, so also sages differ in their different prescriptions. While such things were going on, the great and powerful son of Vyasadeva appeared on the scene. Om Jnana Tirandasya Jnana Shalakaya was born in the darkest of ignorance. My spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge, and for my respectful obeisances unto him. So, this is fascinating to me. This verse and the next three are saying the same things in more detail. So, this is so unusual juxtaposition here that really fascinates me, especially as an artist trying to picture it, as if I were to paint it, or I just try to picture things, and I really can't picture this very well, because it's like a contradiction to how they understood this. But anyway, we have the first part of the verse. At that moment there appeared the powerful son of Vyasadeva, who traveled over the earth, disinterested and satisfied with himself. He did not manifest any symptoms of belonging to any social order or status of life. If that was all there was in the verse, you'd picture like a wise old sage, pretty much. You know, I mean, it would have to be a wise old sage to be like that, generally. And so instead, the next part is like a surprise. He was surrounded with women and children, and he dressed as if others had neglected him, because apparently he dressed as if he didn't dress, because he was going naked. Maybe he grabbed a rag once in a while if he was chilly, but so that's like a contradiction. Then we have the description is of a beautiful, really beautiful young boy, and walking naked, women and children flocking around him. And this is quite fascinating to me, that when he arrived, just as a peek ahead, he arrived among the sages, and they all stood up and welcomed him and gave him the seat of honor. So this is like, obviously they know how to see things that we can't imagine knowing how to see, because we don't really have this experience. And we can read about it, we will read about it, and we can somewhat imagine it, but how they recognized this, how this exalted personality that was so much greater, visibly so much greater and more powerful and pure than all the sages sitting there, that they all immediately responded positively to him to put him in the center and on the high seat. So this is quite fascinating. So I found something really interesting in, I think I'll read the whole section, 5:13:23. Every time I lose my place when I'm using the phone. And it's hard trouble getting back at them. Well, I got the book here, if I'm going to check some. 5:13:23. Well, this is the story of Jad Bharat, and this is further talks between King Rahugana and Jad Bharat. So the situation was, of course, that Jad Bharat had been Bharat Maharaj, and he had been pretty saintly king, very saintly king, pretty advanced spiritually, and he decided it was time to leave his kingdom, renounce everything, and go to the forest. So he did that, and he was living in the forest, and apparently not getting enough association, because he rescued a baby deer, and that somehow was, the mother had died, and he rescued the baby deer, which had been born in a trauma. The mother died in a flood, and the baby deer had been born unexpectedly. So he took care of the baby deer, and baby deer are notorious for being super attractive and charming. And they get all attached, and they're just so sweet and gentle, and they come around and you just fall in love with them. They're notorious for that. And so he had this baby deer that he took care of, and he started to forget his religious practices and his meditations, and it was all about the baby deer. So one time there was a storm at night, and the deer was gone, and he was so attached to the deer, he forgot himself and went running in the dark looking for the deer, calling the deer, and he fell off a cliff in that condition, that mental condition, and died. And so he became a deer in his next life. But because he was so advanced, he had the benediction somehow that he could remember his mistake. He could remember his previous life and remember his mistake. So as he had been, he hung around, this time in association among the other sages, where he perhaps should have been. Maybe he was too alone. But so this deer hung around in the hermitage of the sages and the great devotees. And then finally he died, still remembering, and he became a human again. And this time he still remembered, and he was determined. He was going to stick to it this time. So he became like an avadutta. He played like he was like retarded and, mixed up mental issues, and he wouldn't do anything right, and he did everything wrong, and so everybody would leave him alone, somebody who just couldn't be taught anything. And but one day he got kidnapped by some dacoits who wanted to offer a human specimen to Goddess Durga, and Goddess Durga didn't allow that. She attacked the dacoits instead and saved him. And then he was wandering alone, and King Rahugana, on his way to a pilgrimage, being carried on a palanquin by servants, carrying. He's going on a pilgrimage, right? But he's being carried because he's a king. And so he's not being all the way humble. And so something happened to one of the carriers and hurt his foot or something. And so Jadbharat got grabbed for the service. But he was watching out for stepping on ants, so he was causing the king a lot of bouncing around. And so the king got mad and started to chastise him. And then they had this conversation. The king had to realize that he was talking to a great devotee, because Jadbharat started to lecture the king. So the king realized that he was talking to a great devotee. So, 1815, he had it. I must have moved it.
Maybe you could just, can we just explain what the dacoits offering to Durga means?
Dacoits were another gang of outlaws. And they had a lower religion in those days. You could pick your religion, you could be lower or higher and stuff. Nowadays we don't quite, in the West we don't quite understand this so much. But because of the pervasiveness of the church. But anyway, they would offer a perfect human specimen, and they thought this person who was retarded, it wouldn't matter so much anyway, let's offer him because he's not damaged, and they would offer to Durga. Durga, however, in her temple, she split the deity form, came out of the deity form, and killed those who were trying to behead Jadbharat. And so they got beheaded instead, and then the ghostly servants of Durga is not interested in human sacrifice, but she has ghostly servants hanging around her, and they drank the blood of the... So this was a ghastly scene. Is that what you wanted me to explain?
Yeah, because just explain the whole point of it.
Yeah.
They're worshipping a demigod, or demigoddess in this case. For
material benefit.
Yeah, material benefit.
Participating in a pretty ghastly kind of method.
And they don't even understand the proper way to offer to her.
Yeah, that's true. They don't even know she doesn't want it. So anyway, this is, fast forward again, and Jadbharat has again wandered around because he's escaped and he's rescued, and so he's wandering around again. So King Rahugana on pilgrimage has drafted him to be a carrier, the fourth carrier on his palanquin, to replace his injured other person. And so now he realizes he's been mistreating a great saintly person, an avadutta. Avadutta means someone, we have it in this verse too, someone is translated as neglected by others, but avadutta oftentimes is described as someone who is so exalted he does whatever he wants. He's free of all the rules. Like when Nityananda was an avadutta, and sometimes he would go around naked, and sometimes he would go around and collect necklaces, and everybody gave him those beautiful necklaces, and he was draped with like hundreds of necklaces. So he just did what he wanted, and that's an avadutta. And he's just recognized as a great pure devotee. There was another one, who was the one who became Rishabhadeva became a king who became an avadutta also.
That was his father.
That's right, that's why I almost said, yeah. Bharat Maharaj's father was an avadutta. So, maybe that's how he knew how to do. But anyways, as Jadbharat, his second life after being King Bharat, he was an avadutta also. And so in the purport, let's see, you want to read this is the verse, King Rahugana says to Jadbharat, part of his prayers and apology to him, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the great personalities, whether they walk on the earth's surface as children, young boys, avadutas, or great brahmanas. Even if they are hidden under different guises, I offer my respects to all of them. By their mercy, may there be good fortune in the royal dynasties that are always offending them. So, the royal dynasties are puffed up with prestige, and they measure everything by visible, because kind of that's their job. So they will likely tend to offend these pure devotees. Let's see, I think I was going to read in the purport. Should I read the whole purport, or? Yes, because I'm going to mention the 4 Kumaras. Okay, King Rahugana was very repentant because he had forced Jabharat to carry his palanquin. He therefore began offering prayers to all kinds of brahmanas and self-realized persons, even though they might be playing like children or hiding in some guises. The 4 Kumaras walked everywhere in the guise of 5-year-old boys, and similarly there are many brahmanas, lovers of Brahman, who traverse the globe either as young men, children, or avadutas. Being puffed up due to their position, the royal dynasties generally offend these great personalities. Therefore King Rahugana began to offer his respectful obeisances unto them, so that the offensive royal dynasties might not glide down into a hellish condition. If one offends a great personality, the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not excuse him, although the great personalities themselves might not take offense. So this is it. They're in disguise, but we have to be careful how we treat whoever we treat. But we aren't so good at observing like the great sages. They can tell, and we aren't so good. Vishishaya, can you look up? Type in 4 Kumaras in the search bar. And see somewhere in the middle of the Bhagavatam they were appearing. See if you can find that. They were appearing to some king.
What's the correct spelling?
Kumaras, Kumaras. So, I ran out of power in my phone. I couldn't research that anyway. I wanted to read that. So I saw it, but I didn't write it down.
And which one did you want to know?
They came to visit the king, who recognized them coming. So you can read it, but I'll talk about it.
Prithu Maharaj.
Huh?
They came to see Prithu Maharaj.
Prithu, okay, thank you.
That's in the 4th canto, part 2 or 3.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just describe it. If I don't say it right, you can tell me, because you seem to have read it recently or something.
I read it all the time.
Ah, okay.
But not recently.
So anyway, they came to visit and he recognized them because he's a great saintly king himself. Actually, you might say he's one of these great saintly persons in the guise of a king. But he recognized the 4 Kumaras. But just imagine, all of a sudden, 4 glowing 5-year-old boys appear.
They descended.
Yeah. And so would we know, even if 4 glowing 5-year-old boys descended, naked 5-year-old boys, would we know what to do? I mean, I hope we would. After reading the Bhagavatam so long, I hope we would know what to do, but it would be strange to us. Or maybe it wouldn't. Maybe there'd be such an aura that you would completely overlook the 5-year-old youthfulness and see the ancient sage. That's what's hard for me to imagine, how to see that in the same image. That you would see a child, or in Shukadeva Goswami's case, a 16-year-old boy who was very beautiful and walking around naked, and see the great sage. And so that all the great sages would immediately know this is a great sage. Well, it's partly physiognomy, the proportions of the body, which comes in the next verses. But
yeah.
You got it? No? Okay. So, anyways, let's see. So, huh? You got it? Let's see.
422 talks about.
Okay, 422:1. The great sage Maitreya said, while the citizens were thus praying to the most powerful King Prithu, the 4 Kumaras, who were as bright as the sun, arrived on the spot. Seeing the glowing effulgence of the 4 Kumaras, the masters of all mystic power, the king and his associates could recognize them as they descended from the sky. Seeing the 4 Kumaras, Prithu Maharaj was greatly anxious to receive them. Therefore the king, with all his officers, very hastily got up, as anxiously as a conditioned soul whose senses are immediately attracted by the modes of material nature. When will we be that eager to serve the great devotees? When the great sages accepted their reception, according to the instructions of the Shastras, and finally took their seats offered by the king. The king, influenced by the glories of the sages, immediately bowed down. Thus he worshipped the 4 Kumaras. And it goes on to the worship and everything. Thank you. So the 4 Kumaras, this is another interesting side of this. These great personalities at times have control over their own age. The 4 Kumaras chose to remain 5-year-old boys. They were not strictly like earthbound persons. They were the first sons of Lord Brahma. It's a really highly subtle kind of body form. But they
I figured it out.
I lose my train of thought.
I know.
Anyways, I guess I'll go. Right. So, anyways, what was I saying?
They're saying they chose to.
Yeah,
They-
I figured it
As soon
out.
as they finish talking, we'll be able to continue.
Yes.
Okay. So no, I guess not.
They chose their age. They did not want to procreate and become attached. Like their father, he started creating. He had his job is to populate the universe, right? He's doing this as devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's been directly ordered to do this, and so the first sons he creates refuse to do it. So, but we are self-satisfied. We don't want to get involved in this sex life and these attachments and family and all this stuff. We just don't want to do that. We just want to meditate on the Lord. So, of course, that's where Lord Shiva came from, too, because Lord Brahma controlled himself, but he felt angry from his own frustration. And so, up from between his eyebrows comes Lord Shiva. So, and he was a kind of manifestation of anger at that time. And so anyway, the Lord Shiva is the next younger brother of the 4 Kumaras, and sometimes they show up at the same time to worship the form of the Lord. So anyway, because they're directly brothers. But anyway, the 4 Kumaras chose to remain 5-year-old boys. And as 5-year-old boys, they meditated for like thousands of years, and they went up to Vaikuntha, and at the gate of Vaikuntha, they ran into Jaya and Vijay, who were headed for a pastime, and it was all arranged, but somebody just didn't receive them right. Well, actually, how could they know? Here come these 5-year-old boys, able to take themselves up to Vaikuntha. This was sort of unprecedented anyways. And they arrive at the gate, 5-year-old boys naked, and they want to come in from the material world. So the Jaya and Vijay were not prepared for this, or else their mind was put into a state by the Lord who wanted the pastime. So he wanted this dynamic where the 4 Kumaras, they wouldn't let them in, and the 4 Kumaras then thought that was the wrong attitude for a gatekeeper of Vaikuntha, and so cursed them to go to the material world. Then Vishnu Narayan arrived on the spot and sorted it out and said, well, I want a pastime, so you go 3 times as 7 times as devotees, or 3 times as demons, and come back quicker. So that's how that happened. All these stories are interconnected, but they were 5-year-old boys, but they were ancient sages. So these are very fascinating, just a very fascinating juxtaposition to me. And the sages all recognized Sukadeva Goswami as a great ancient sage, more experienced than they were. Experienced in what? Well, he had been a liberated soul already, so he didn't see the need to come out of his mother's womb. And so he stayed in there for 14 or 15 or 16 years, and he didn't come out. He refused to be born. Now, right there, he did not kill his mother by being. Now, if we had a 14, 15, 16-year-old boy in the womb, we'd die. The woman would die from that, stretched, we would just kill her. But apparently, he stayed a baby, because she didn't die from it. And then he was born. Then immediately he walks off to the forest. So this is like his father Vyasadeva, who was conceived in a specially arranged fog in the river, and a specially arranged island on the river, but in the womb of Satyavati, the riverman's daughter, who wasn't married, and Parashara became attracted to her, and he wanted to have a son. So he he talked her into, he said, well, don't worry, I'll preserve your virginity and I'll give you benedictions and make you more attractive. So she would smell beautiful and all that. So in one day, in one afternoon, I guess, Srila Vyasadeva was conceived, was born, and was as a young man, became a young man, and promised his mother that if she needed him, she would just think of him and he would come, and then he walked over with his father. So one day. So these personalities have some kind of control over their age and how they appear. And that was even on planet Earth. The 4 Kumaras were on Lord Brahma's planet when they refused to grow up. But this was even on planet Earth. So that kind of doesn't matter. The sages are, these sages are kind of different beings. Oh, there was some... Let's see.
And these people, Brahma was creating these people, like the Kumar at the beginning. He wanted Prajapatis, or
wanted them to create
population. And Narada Muni would preach to them, no, you don't want to get all entangled. Stay brahmachari. Stay celibate. Like, that's the Radha Damodar phase of ISKCON.
Yeah. And Daksha got really mad. Because the person who's supposed to be doing his duty and populating the universe, he gets a son that won't do it. Or he gets some... Was Narada Muni his brother too? Daksha's brother? Or was Daksha the younger brother of Narada Muni? Or was he like another generation or so?
Narada Muni was...
Direct son of Brahma.
He comes from Brahma, but he came at the beginning of the creation, from the last creation, as Narada Muni.
Yeah, but that's how he became Narada Muni. He's a son of Brahma, he became Narada Muni.
Yeah, exactly.
But he was previously a pure devotee.
Yeah,
he was like almost pure. And so after the annihilation and the recreation of the world, then Lord Brahma had a son. It was a whole devastation and recreation. So then he came as one of Lord Brahma's first sons. I must have been after... The 4 Kumaras were his firstborn, were his first sons, and then Lord Shiva came from that, so it must have been after that. And then I don't know if Daksha came in that generation, or if Daksha was another generation down. But anyway, by that time, apparently some things were cooking, so Lord Brahma didn't get mad, because some things were cooking. But Daksha had a duty to populate, and he had 10,000 sons, and that should be pretty good, and then they all decided not to get married. Who would they marry anyways? 10,000... Maybe somebody else had 10,000 daughters, or I don't know how that was supposed to work. But they wouldn't marry. So, anyways, what's another... So, anyway, Shukadeva Goswami, I was talking about his age. So he was 16 years old, apparently, the day he was born, because he walked off into the forest. And then that was... During the time, it was Lord Krishna who talked him into being born. So, okay, I'll come out. Don't worry, you won't be overwhelmed by this. Lord Krishna talked him into coming out. And then he went into the forest. So Lord Krishna was still on the planet then. And furthermore, when Lord Krishna went to, I talked about this recently, to the kingdom of Videha. And he took some sages with him. Shukadeva Goswami was there. And I will read that. Prove it. Canto 86. Where and 86. Same chapter as Arjuna kidnaps Subhadra and Krishna blesses it. Krishna blesses his devotees, meaning the king and Shrutadeva Brahmana. So 17 and 18. After Shukadeva Goswami has explained to Parikshit Maharaj about how in this distant kingdom there was 2 pure devotees, Shrutadeva Brahmana, and the king was named Bahulashva. So both of these devotees were very dear to Lord Achyuta. So Shukadeva Goswami says, pleased with both of them, the Supreme Personality of Godhead mounted his chariot which Daruka had brought, and traveled to Videha with a group of sages, 18. Among these sages were Narada, Vamadev, Atri, Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, Parashurama, Asita, Aruni, myself, Brihaspati, Kanva, Maitreya, and Chavana. So this was back when Krishna was, on the planet going around doing the things in his pastimes. And among the sages who went was Shukadev. So that's very interesting. And a long time passed because then Krishna left. And then the Pandavas left after that. And the Crown Parishas came. Parishas traveled over the world, heard in different kingdoms about the Pandavas, encountered Kali, reinstituted religious principles and cow protection, and then was out hunting, and then got cursed, and all this happened. And Shukadev was still 16. So after spending 6 years in Husar, obviously he was patrolling his age also. He just stayed 16. And by his description, he looks a lot like Krishna. And Krishna always looked like 16. So that must have been part of it. But anyway, here he was walking around looking like a 16-year-old boy, madman, very beautiful, but unfortunately quite crazy and detached from everything. And so the common people ignored him, the children were attracted, and the women felt it safe to be there with their children being attracted to him. They all felt it was safe. It was like when earlier in the first canto, when Shukadev was walking through the forest, he passed the young girls bathing naked in the river, in their designated place where the women go to bathe. So he walks past there, and they don't care. They feel quite safe. They don't jump out and get dressed or anything. And he goes past it. His father's going after him, trying to catch him. I guess that was when I was leaving and going to the forest. But anyway, his father was going after him, calling him. And his father, being a family man, because he had a wife and he had a son, so then his father comes by and the girls hurry up and get dressed. And they say, well, why didn't you get dressed when my son walked by? Well, we know that he's safe for us. We know he doesn't care. And we could tell. And we know that you're a family man, so you distinguish. And so therefore we quickly got dressed. So the girls bathing could tell. Apparently they must have been a little bit spiritually aware or something. The common people neglected him, and however the women felt it was safe. They maybe didn't know what they could tell, but they felt he was safe, and the children felt he was safe, and he was attractive, but totally safe. And the sages could tell in their way, which we'll come up on next. So this is all very fascinating that great saintly persons wander the earth in different disguises, and only those who have some ability to tell. So we have to be very careful how we treat everybody, basically. Actually, Krishna comes in every species, and then the species listed, well, we know in the Bhagavatam, but it says he comes in every species, so we should be kind to all the animals too. You never really know. And so they're not just because they are eternal spirit souls, but who knows what ways Krishna has come to this world. So I'll stop here. Is there comments or questions?
Yes,
yeah.
When you say Krishna comes in all species, what do you mean?
I don't know, but it says he comes. Where does it say that? It says that more than once. He comes in all species. I don't know what it means.
I think he says it in the Bhagavad Gita.
Huh?
I think he says it in the Bhagavad Gita.
It's for sure said the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. It said that.
Lord Chaitanya. Teachings of Lord Chaitanya.
Oh, thank you. Oh.
I can research it. I remember reading about Jesus and Krishna, and Prabhupada would explain different things, and he did say something about how the Lord, comes in like all different species. If I get that paper, I'll show it to you.
And actually he came as half man, half lion. And when Hiranyakashipu didn't recognize him, he thought, oh, I'll kill him. Well, I guess he sort of knew, but he didn't recognize the greatness, and he planned on killing him. Big and scary or what? Well, I got benediction, so I'm going to do it. But it didn't work out that way.
And Kurma too, right?
Who?
Matsya, Kurma, and all that species.
The fish and the tortoise.
I can't quite hear.
Matsya and Kurma.
Yeah.
What's that species?
And Matsya, the sage who had this fish.
Yep.
Strange, you didn't kind of wonder why the fish could talk, but the fish apparently could talk or be more telepathic. message to him or something like that, and this fish, little teeny fish, asked for help. Big fish were chasing him. So he put him in a bowl of water, and then he grew and it was too small for him, and then he kept having to have bigger bodies of water in the stage. Finally, when the fish needed the ocean, finally this what's that word? Who is it? Maitreya? This great sage. Did you hand up? No, you're sorry. This great sage recognized who this was, and then it was Amanu, that this fish pulled his boat when the waters of devastation came, and it preserved the Vedas somehow like that. It was not a sage, it was a great saint that came, so it was a mother.
So that means, can we say that if Krishna comes in all species, maybe we don't have the story of all the species, we just have the one that we have.
That would be a big story, yeah. I would assume that, because it never elaborates, and in the purport it always just routinely mentions the known ones already, we already know. So, but every species is a particular word in English that means every species, so that's all I know about it. It says that.
And Anantasesha is glorifying the Lord with his unlimited mouth.
And he never finishes.
He never finishes, so. And then there's all these other universes, that material universes, and I realize that the basic ones that we have here are happening in the, because Prabhupada said it's like a roadshow, goes from one universe to the next, but they are larger, and this, I always, philosophically have speculated, if that's the right word, philosophically, that some of these other incarnations are, in these other larger places. There's a lot of scriptures that we haven't gotten all of. There's more that, we're just on the particles of the drops of the ocean have sprayed our face with this Bhagavatam.
And is it the Brahma Samhita is supposed to have how many chapters, and we only have chapter 5?
Yeah.
Is it 100 chapters or something?
More.
Were they lost, or
what?
Were they lost?
Yeah.
They're not. Yeah, they're lost. Lost
Yeah.
to us. Yeah.
Lord Chaitanya found one in a book in an obscure temple.
Okay.
And he got all ecstatic, and so they therefore it's been copied and translated for us by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. So we have the Brahma Samhita.
Which would mean that since it's Lord Chaitanya, it's all he thought we needed, or what we could
Yeah.
absorb.
Yeah, that was good enough. Yeah. And I don't know where I read this, I didn't write it down, because I was losing power and I was losing light, and battery light was going down, everything was going down. So, that these great sages, they come to the material world. Now some may be like, somebody who's advanced up to that stage, but some have come to the material world. And it's not just incarnations of the Lord in every species, but these different great sages come to the material world to preach in different ways. And it looks like Shukadeva Goswami's main thing was to speak the Bhagavatam. Because otherwise he was just an avadhuta, and he just wandered about completely free of all designations and rules, and just nice and gentle and free, and everybody felt safe with him, but everybody neglected him because they thought he was a madman or something, because he was kind of crazy. And so then he arrives in this situation and he speaks the Bhagavatam. So sometimes there's, Uddhava, when Krishna left, only Uddhava survived of his family, and he told him, that's because I want you to preach about me, so go to Bhadri
To preach the Narayana.
Yeah, preach.
It was called the Uddhava Gita, and Krishna had more time
Yeah.
than he did with Arjuna.
Yes, but he was supposed to repeat this to
Uddhava. And he was to Narayana.
He was supposed to repeat it to Narayana Rishi?
Right, yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't understand that part. So, yeah, okay. So sometimes it seems like, okay, so they tell one person, what about all the rest? But you're reincarnated, no souls are ever lost, and reincarnation is happening, and souls that are meant to hear it, that are ready to hear it will be in a human form at the time it's available by being handed down. And that's how it happens for us. And so somehow, in this rare opportunity, not totally by chance, but by some kind of karmic destiny or desire, we are allowed to, there's some readiness, been discerned by the Lord in our heart, that we can actually be here when the Hare Krishna movement is here. Somehow it's been worked out. And there is also causeless mercy. I read something recently about taking Narada Muni's story of how he was, somebody put this on the internet, Narada Muni was a child and the great devotees came and his mother was serving him, so he also assisted and served them, and once by their permission he took remnants, and then his life began to change. He began to lose interest in material things and be contracted to spiritual. And although he was always already sort of like primed for it, he didn't have interest in his sports, he just wanted to be good. And so, but he was just like 5 years old or 6 years old or something. And so comparing that to Prabhupada, so by permission, you have to, there has to be some qualification. But in Lord Chaitanya's time, this person wrote, can't remember his name, he said that our qualification is that we're not qualified, because that was Lord Chaitanya's purpose, to give to everybody who's not qualified. So in a sense, our qualification is that we're not qualified. But also our qualification is we have to have some willingness to be interested. So we have some attraction, and that makes us qualified to receive more and more. So then we read the remnants. Well, in a sense, since this person pointed out that since the Prabhupada's purports are his greatest ecstasies, when we read them, we feel something inside that's different. We get elevated. So we are taking his remnants of his ecstasy. So it was a really, really beautiful thought. And then we read one book or one part of a book or something, and we begin to change. We begin to be attracted and change our life and lose attraction for little at a time for this material world. Get a higher taste. So that was quite fascinating.
I think
beautiful.
where you read this about the great souls coming down is in a previous purport a couple of days ago. At the end of one of the purports, I think it's the one that I read after you. Whichever, was it 21 or 22 or something? It says that they descend as messiahs.
That's it, yes. Okay, I read some researching, you read so many things. Where did I read that? Yes, thank you. Descend as messiahs.
I just remembered it because I read that one.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I read them all, of course, no.
When you read them all to get the gist of how it flows, then you forget what you read where, and so much I wish I could contain it and keep it, but I keep on getting mixed up and losing it.
And this one thing is so as far as with Bharat Maharaj, that's the one I always, I used to, while it was just some exaggerated pastime, that Krishna has created, that such a great soul would just be attracted to a baby deer. And I really believe actually it is sort of like the story of Parikit, where he puts this garland of the snake and he gets cursed so severely, gets sentenced to death. So it's obviously because it's setting up the scene so that we can hear the Bhagavatam. So there's this kind of yoga maya that's happening. But seeing a deer, a baby deer, I've meditated on so long, but then I think I've mentioned this before, a few years ago, I was driving between Alachua and St. Augustine, Florida, and on the side of the road was a mother deer who had just been hit by a car. Mm. And the baby was just there, standing next to the mother. Mm. And I just, it was the most adorable, innocent entity, what to do. And I already have, the problem with my wife taking in stray dogs, and now I'm supposed to take in a stray deer? All I could do was just chant and pray for it when I saw it. So, but those are instances where Because I was thinking, how can he be? He was so advanced. He was the emperor of the world. The planet, in Vedic terms, is named after Varsa. That's this planet, and he was a great soul. But it's obviously so we can get the whole story of him taking birth as a deer, taking birth as Jad Bharat, and not caring for the world, withdrawing his senses in, like a Babaji almost, or Avadhuta. So we can, And
then we get to compare the Durga worship and learn about that. And then he preaches to the
emperor.
Yeah. So we get to hear him preach. Sometimes it's only one person gets preached to, but it's recorded in the Bhagavatam, and now everybody gets access to it.
Exactly.
And you think, well, it's so isolated, one little preaching, but because the great saints, the great sages like Vyasadeva can access this knowledge of this conversation, that conversation, and pull it together. So we have all this.
And these sound vibrations of these stories, or the sound vibration of the holy name, it's purifying the whole atmosphere of this world. It's changing the attitude and the hearts of people, whether they're aware of it or not. I mean, we think it's bad now, but you take out the Hare Krishna mantra and the discussion of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, or the discussion of Lord Jesus, you take out anything that's directly connected to God or His Messiah, you can't imagine what the hell that we would be in. But we should feel that we know. Prabhupada said that our movement, the sound vibrations from the Hare Krishna mantra and the distribution of books, helped to stop the godless form of government called communism. Because we were distributing so many books underground at great risk. Most people in the Western world don't understand what kind of sacrifices devotees made to distribute books in the Eastern Bloc countries and in Russia itself. It was great, There's one famous story, it's funny. I'll tell you quickly, that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, first of all, he's African American, and he's somewhere in like Yugoslavia or something. And this is at the height of the Iron Curtain, the middle 70s, Prabhupada was alive. And he had books in the car he was smuggling in. He got to a border checkpoint. He also had a dog with him. And he knew that they wouldn't allow a dog to come in without having the proper... And he didn't have the proper paperwork. So he pulls up to the border checkpoint, and they start talking to him, and he's got the books hidden in there, and he just has to get past them. So then what he does is, it's a small border checkpoint, a remote one. So there's just like one or two people. So what he does is, he just casually opens the door, and the dog runs out, and they start chasing after the dog. And then he just takes off. And that's how we got in.
Wow. Amazing. Dad heard that story a long time ago, totally forgot it. Thanks.
I just remembered it just now, as I was talking. Anyway, I have things I have to do.
Thank you. Well, thank you all very much. Anybody else have any question or comment? No, you don't? Okay. All glories to... Thank you all very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, and all glories to Srimad Bhagavatam.